Hello, my name is Brett Kirkpatrick, and I'm a staff psychologist at Towson University's Counseling Center. This is the third video in a series of 3 videos that are designed to discuss race and racism, with a particular focus on working with white students to develop greater insights and understanding of the historical impact of racism on the present day. Today's video will discuss different ways white individuals can work to support people of color. As always, please feel free to share comments in the comments section below. At the end of the first video, I shared some potential tangible actions that a white person could undertake to show support for people of color during the current racial justice movement happening today. These actions included going to protests, being active on social media, talking to friends and family about the underlying issues, and checking in with friends and colleagues of color. Moving to action is a very important piece of supporting racial justice, as inaction and silence only allows oppression and racism to continue undeterred. However, moving to action is sometimes easier said than done. Thinking about how to change the entire system can lead to feeling overwhelmed, which can then lead to being immobilized. Likewise, some white individuals struggle with moving to action if they worry that their actions will be paternalistic and/or limiting to the autonomy of marginalized groups, which would only reinforce current power imbalances. In this video, I want to discuss the process of figuring out how best to act, as opposed to simply providing a boilerplate action plan that might lack nuance and the flexibility to adapt to different contexts. From my personal experience and research, the process for figuring out how best to act in support of racial justice begins with examining and identifying our own underlying motivations and intentions, because acting without understanding them could be unimpactful at best and harmful at worst. As I've done in my previous videos, I'll use an example from my personal life. 8 years ago, I began working in a Baltimore neighborhood a little further south down York Road that was defined as a food desert. I didn't know this when I started, but my underlying motivation at the time was to be a white savior. I felt I would come in with all of the answers and save the neighborhood residents through my plan and actions. I wanted to help the residents in this neighborhood without ever having asked if they needed or wanted my help. After spending time listening to the neighborhood residents, I learned that their problems were not what I originally believed them to be. I realized that I was very lucky that my boss had steered me toward a research project that made me listen to the residents, because if she had not done that, I know the course of action I wanted to take originally would not have worked. As white people, if we rush to act to try to help oppressed people without first asking if they need or want our help, we risk doing the wrong thing and also potentially harming others, even if it is unintentional. I think in white culture it is easy to want to be a white savior, since white culture typically values taking a leadership position and being action-oriented. However, I believe that working toward racial justice for white individuals means interrupting those motivations and actually doing the opposite. After listening to the residents of the food desert, who were predominantly people of color and from a lower socioeconomic status than myself, I realized that they needed me to play a supportive role where they were providing leadership to me. I learned that the best way for me to help was to do what they asked of me in a supportive role. In addition to listening to those who we are trying to aid, it is also important to continue to educate ourselves as white people. As I shared in the first 2 videos, my definitions and understanding of racism and how it manifests have changed throughout my life. If you are a white person, it may be important to reflect on how you understand and define racism historically and currently. History shows that racism has evolved, so it is likely that it will evolve again. Learning more about the history of racism and race relations in this country has helped me learn about the present applications of racism, which will hopefully help me be prepared for when it evolves again. After listening to people of color and educating ourselves about the history of race and racism, it is important to integrate what we have learned and then take action. Many times taking action involves interrupting racism when we observe it, sharing with other white individuals what we have learned, and supporting and helping people of color assume positions of leadership. I want to conclude this video by talking about one last underlying motivation that may be the most important: personal responsibility. Since white people do not experience racism, it can be easy to externalize and assume it only impacts people of color. Racism has many deleterious impacts on white people as well, including competition with other whites, inability to form close and genuine relationships with people of color, and lack of awareness of the harm that may be committed by us as individuals. Assuming personal responsibility and taking action can be powerful, even if the actions do not appear grandiose. Drawing from one last personal example, I was at a party and a group of about 7 people were all talking in a circle. One person, whom I did not know, made a joke that was covertly racist. I wanted to say something to let him know I disagreed with what he said, but I froze and said nothing. However, the person next to me did say something to the effect of, "I don't agree with what you said," and walked away. The entire rest of the group, including myself, also walked away, leaving the person who made the comments all alone. I felt irritated with myself for not saying something, but I also felt motivated by the fact that the entire rest of the group felt the same way that I did. I challenged myself to not look away and be silent again. Nowadays, when I do speak up, I always find that I am more supported by other whites than not. I hope you will find your motivation and personal responsibility to speak up and challenge racism too. Thank you.